We are live. Hello, Susan here from Get in the Groove. So today is going to be an awesome day. Let me just type in what we're going to be talking about. And what we are talking about is loneliness is an epidemic, especially amongst women over 50. So we think this is a big problem. We want to try to understand what is going on out there. So we've invited an expert, Sarah Kenney, who's a psychotherapist, to join us. And I am here with my good friends, Alyssa and Phyllis. You may have joined us on earlier conversations. I think what happened here is that we've all been doing a lot of reading, and we have found that loneliness is really, it's a big epidemic. As a matter of fact, today we did a poll on Get in the Groove. And do you know what the response was? What do you think it was?
Over 50.
What do you think, Phyllis?
I would say at least 40 to 50%.
It was 61% of our followers said that they were lonely. So something is going on out there. And I don't know about you, but I know I have my moments. There's times when I feel I have a very fulfilled life, but there are definitely times I feel lonely.
It's so interesting too, because you know how sometimes when you're talking about a subject, suddenly it'll pop up on your phone like somebody's listening.
Yeah, right.
That's kind of what's happened to me since I knew we were going to talk about loneliness. Out of nowhere, I'm talking to a friend, happened the other day at lunch, and we're talking. She had no idea that I was doing this today, and she's just sort of telling me a story. And then she said, I've really been feeling lonely lately. And I thought, wait a minute, that is so bizarre because that's exactly what we're going to talk about.
Right.
And
But that's different because that didn't come from your phone. That was a real
no. I'm saying it's like that.
with a
Yeah,
friend.
yes, exactly. I just mean it's that kind of thing that seems to be in the air. Just by having talked about it, I feel like I've welcomed it in that somebody would talk to me about this. And
Now that we talked about it, it's interesting. The other day I was with a group of girlfriends for dinner, and I realized, everybody was talking a million miles an hour, and I feel like I felt lonely
Can you accept
on
it?
on this dinner invitation.
Oh, sorry. Sorry.
wait,
So
sorry.
Oh, no.
it's someone else.
Yeah, somebody else. Somebody wants to join our conversation that we didn't.
No,
But you can join, by the way, by typing in comments, and we will be more than happy to answer those questions. So,
but what I find interesting is when you're
Sorry.
with a group of people and you feel lonely and
Yeah.
you're socializing, right?
you mean
feel
at the dinner?
at the dinner
Oh.
or at a party. I find that so fascinating because you're with friends, but you still can feel lonely. Does anyone out there feel that way?
Yeah, because I think there's chronic loneliness. There are people that are suffering from really life circumstances, and it's a chronic situation, and very important to talk about that too.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of us, there's this sort of very profound, maybe intermittent, but very profound feelings of loneliness that come. And it could be, you can be married, you can have children, and you can even have friends, and yet experience this sort of, maybe it's sort of an existential loneliness, but you can feel those moments.
One of the things, I know we've talked about this before, I started Get in the Groove because I had talked to a lot of women. I know we talked about this, and everybody was telling me that they felt invisible, which I think is another way of saying lonely.
Yes.
And what, I found from talking to people and doing a little research and stuff is that when you turn 50, it is like this, it's a perfect storm in probably not a great way, because you go through these major life changes physically, emotionally, become potentially an empty nester. A lot of people, unfortunately, break up. So there's a lot of that going on. Professionally, if you're working, you might be getting aged out. So there's like all this change happening at once that I think leads to, it's like such a lot of change that it leads, I think, oftentimes to, feeling lonely. And I think that, trying to understand this would be great. And there is Sarah Kenney.
At last, it finally worked. Sorry.
It's perfect time because we're all trying to figure out if we can understand better loneliness in women 50 plus. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I literally couldn't connect and then I could connect. So
Okay, great. Well, that's good.
It's all about connection.
That's
what we're talking about.
That is the answer, right? Connections. Is that the answer to solving these problems? problem?
I think it is. I do
Yeah.
think it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm, go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. Go on.
I was gonna say, I just was jumping on. I heard you talking about an invitation to a dinner party, but I didn't catch where. So catch me up and or ask
Yeah, I
anything.
think I think what we've been talking a little bit of how we're all feeling. And Alyssa was saying sometimes she goes out with girlfriends and she's actually with a group of friends feeling lonely. We're talking
Yes.
about how over 50, lots of things happen in your life, professionally, physically, emotionally, that might cause these changes. Phyllis, just like impromptu was having lunch with somebody and they just out of nowhere said that they were feeling lonely. So clearly there's an epidemic going on out there. We often hear about it with younger kids now because of social media. But I think there's something so real happening with women 50 plus, and we're just hoping maybe you can help us understand why and then maybe what we can do about it.
Sure, yeah. Well, I mean, I think there's a million reasons why, but one point you just touched on was that as we get over 50, our own circumstances change. So maybe you had children at home, you were very
Mhm.
focused on raising kids, maybe involved with the parents of your kids' friends. Suddenly everybody's out in the world, you're not so connected with them. You might change your job. I know uh, uh, for many people, and Susan, you and I were chatting once and you mentioned this, people can feel very connected to friends at work who are, in fact, work
Mhm.
friends,
Right.
but it's emphasis friend while you're working with them, and it's
As a
emphasis work.
friend, in quotes.
Yeah, once you leave the job, things can sort of peter out or fritter away. And
Yeah.
so the question becomes, how do you make new connections when you don't have
Yes.
these automatic avenues in? And oh, go ahead, Phyllis, were you about to say
No,
something?
no. What's interesting about what you're saying is that um, because you still might have your two or three intimate friends,
Yes,
but the larger community disappears that you're used
yes,
to having, whether it's your kids in school and you've got all the parents in school in that kind of connection or work connection, because
yes.
that seems important in its own right, as well as those intimate friends if you're lucky enough to have them.
I think you're right. I mean, the way that I describe it to people sometimes is that most of us have what I would call narrow but deep friends. So, like maybe the three of you are very close and you can go a little deeper. And then we have a broader spectrum, the shallow but broad group of
Right.
friends. And that's what can really contract when there are life changes. And if you're sort of narrow but deep group of friends, let's say somebody travels or becomes unavailable for a number of reasons, it can really suddenly shift for you. So you want to think about how do you expand maybe even that narrow but broad group. And one thing that I do recommend, you mentioned dinner parties. It's really tricky because you might meet someone at a party or a gathering and you like them, but it's it feels awkward to say, "Oh, I've known you for 11 minutes, but I think we should go to lunch." But you
I was
you
just going to
really
ask that question.
Stalker-esque.
exactly.
Yeah.
But you have to tolerate that vulnerable moment of fearing you're going to be perceived as a stalker. A lot of people are really relieved. I find with people that there are a few people who are very, very good at inviting people to things, and then a much larger group of people who love to accept an invitation but never feel comfortable inviting.
Mm.
So sometimes you have to stretch your comfort zone a little bit and become someone who asks. Go
So you're
ahead.
saying you really, if you're not an inviter, you
Yes.
should really start to become an inviter.
Try.
Like as you
Okay.
get,
Yes.
try it.
Try.
As you get older, like it takes a lot of time, doesn't it, actually to make a new friend,
Yeah.
right? Is
Yes,
that's
yes,
also something that I think we kind of think, oh, this is going to be so much work.
I mean, I
yes,
think it does
that's
take
right.
so much time. I mean, I don't know that there's any shortcuts to this. I mean, you really have to make put the time into the friendship, right? I just want to jump in here. If people have questions, please feel free to type them in the comments section, and then Sarah or whoever can answer them. Because anyway, I'm
Yeah,
sure a lot of questions related to this, but yeah, it does take a lot of work. I mean, I think about even Phyllis, our friendship, we're late in life friends, but we've put a lot of work into, that friendship. Same with Alyssa. But I can think back to like the first time even calling Phyllis, it felt
yes,
weird. Like we had gone out a bunch of times, like socially.
I feel like I give you a hard time.
No,
I didn't know you felt that way.
so
no, but
sweet.
no, but I mean, did. It was like, making that call the first time. It's like, it's a little weird. I
Awkward.
don't know. I mean, I could pick up the phone for business and call anybody and pitch
Yes.
anybody,
Yeah.
but somehow this just feels, to your point, you feel a lot more vulnerable. But I guess
Yes.
maybe think about, like, what's the person on the other end? They're probably so happy that somebody called.
Yes, I
I don't
think
think
they
No, this is
often.
what was really happy. I remember the date and the time. I was really happy.
And I was happy when she called me too, but it's just out of the blue. But I remember meeting Phyllis. This is such a perfect example. And I'm going, who is that smart, funny, amazing lady? And I don't think I ever reached out to like make a coffee date or lunch date, did I? And now we're together and I'm so happy. But,
I feel like it's my
I
birthday.
missed that opportunity.
Alyssa, you're actually really good at this. You
Yeah,
do this a lot.
I'm
Like,
good.
you're one of the few people that I think I've met later in life that, like, every once in a while there'll just be
Yes.
a message on my phone from
That's
Alyssa, like,
nice.
"Hi, just calling to say." I'm like, "Oh, that's like, just it."
Thank you.
Yeah, no, it means a lot. It does mean a lot. It
I
really
was
does.
trained to do that.
Yeah.
Also because of business and sales. I was in sales for so many years. I had to pick up and cold call.
Mm.
So then it was a little easier to pick up and cold call someone you
Well,
liked.
and with you specifically, my understanding is you're a nutritionist, and
Mhm.
that means that you have a lot of uh, can be difficult conversations with people, or where people feel, back to this word vulnerable, but very vulnerable with you. So you've built up a capacity
Mhm.
to have conversations that feel a little deeper, a little more meaningful. I think for a lot of people in business, they do learn how to have that kind of water cooler chat or sales chat, but getting into the deeper stuff is
Right.
harder, and that is where people connect, is through vulnerability. So
Yeah.
you have to be willing to have
Open.
um, yeah, yeah,
Well,
yeah.
Sarah, do you find, I mean, this idea, like, for example, I would never invite people over for dinner. People who know me.
There's a reason.
No, there's a reason why.
Never.
I mean, it's
I've never
hard
been
to,
over that.
how many times can you say, well, tonight is takeout? It's
Yeah.
not going to be, but the idea of stretching yourself in some way or another, like, Susie and I always talk about this in terms of our relationship, which is golf became
Yes.
a really communal activity that led to a lot of other, experiences and a lot of other closeness and intimacy. But it was really about the community of golf, something that I hated before I got into it. I never in a million years thought I would play golf. And I was already in my mid 60s when I started that. That's, I think, an important point.
Yeah.
And I started it because I was feeling lonely. And my
Yes.
husband was a golfer. I heard him on the phone saying to a pro, "I can't make that lesson." And I found myself saying, "I'll take it,"
Oh,
out of
that's great.
nowhere,
That's great.
because I was lonely. I really was. And so I think not only I think you need to find that thing. If it's not inviting people to dinner, I think you need to find a place, something that interests you, even if it's not that you can join. I mean, it sounds so corny in a way, but
It's
I think
not corny. This is actually, I mean, that is legitimate advice that we give people all the time, is find a group, whether it's a class or whether it's a
It's a
community
sport.
group. Yes,
Right.
sport is great.
Yeah.
And anything like that. There are hiking groups that people do. But if you do what you love, you will meet other people who love
Yeah.
something that you love. And it's a
Yeah.
good way to, or in Phyllis's case, don't love, but learn to love.
Mhm.
But it is a very, sorry, go ahead, Susan.
No. I wanted to go back for a second because, I mean, we know this is an epidemic out there. We know there's a lot of reasons that are related to change, but I'm wondering if you can help us understand the difference between all these changes that happen after 50 versus this feeling of loneliness from FOMO, right? From
Yeah,
social
yes.
media, because I feel that's so real. Like, I mean, it's not a great way to wake up. You're scrolling through your phone. You're like, what? I wasn't invited to that party.
Yes.
Like that.
Yes.
What? And, at the end of the day, maybe I really wouldn't have wanted to go, but
You want to be invited.
I wanted to be invited. I wanted
Yes.
to be invited, and then I wanted to be in bed at 9 o'clock. But
Yes.
I still wanted to be invited, and so I don't know. Like it feels different to me. I'm not quite sure if it is, but it does make me feel lonely. When
Yes.
I see that.
Yes, but you know, the thing that's really important for people to remember is, first of all, that FOMO, you hear about it in younger people, but you're absolutely dead on. It's straight through. Doesn't
Right.
matter how old or young you are, you're going to feel it if you happen into a photograph of six people you know, four people you know, and two you don't, out to brunch or lunch or dinner. Sorry, there's a dog in the room. Um,
It's alive.
yeah, it's alive. But you know, there are a few things. How close are these people really? You want to ask yourself that. First of all, it may be that you're really good friends with two of them, but the other four of them know each other from different circumstances. If it is all people who are close of that group at another time, you really may want to have a hard conversation about what they could tell you about why you might not have been invited. That's a difficult thing for people, but you can say whatever it is, I'd really rather know because I would love to learn from it. There might be something you can take away. More often than not, things look different online than they are in real life. I
Right.
can't stress how many times it isn't at all what you think. It really turns out to be that it was four people sitting together at a table at a child's birthday party and their parents of all the children's friends. And that's the only reason you weren't there was your child went to a different school or is at a different school, or I mean, it could be anything like that. It could be an old photograph. And to your point, also, it's always worth asking yourself when you see a group activity to which you weren't invited. Wait a second. When I get over the sting of feeling excluded, do I really wish I was there? If the answer is yes, then again, like let's circle back, let's find out why you weren't there. But you may find, no, actually, that was so and so's birthday party, and of this whole group, she and I are the least close, and I'm fine that I wasn't there. Actually, I don't
I,
think that would have been fun. Go ahead.
I do want to say, like when that's happened to me and I've gone out and a friend has called to say, hey, you were out with friends and I didn't get invited. I felt awful and also made an extra effort with that person to like say, it was because of this and then included her next time. And sometimes you kind of just forget, right? About like when you get caught up in an event and you forget about the other friends that should be there or not. I mean, how do you say
Yes.
that? How do you respond to that?
I can tell you, I have two personal stories. One is actually once I was curious about why I wasn't invited, and my friend had to point out to me that I should have known this. I was out of town when the event happened, so check that for yourself. But there was another time
Love
where it
that.
was a group, and I was surprised I wasn't invited, and I actually was saying that my feelings were hurt to a mutual friend from that group, and she said, "Well, actually, I'm glad you're telling me because that was my fault." I
Yeah.
forgot that you knew this other person whose
Um,
party it was, and I didn't invite you. I was in charge of the guest list.
oversight. Yeah.
Yeah. So to Alyssa's point, I mean, it is actually really useful to find out because you may be imagining it's because people don't like you, but it is a genuine
Exactly.
But
oversight.
there's another piece of this that maybe it's acquaintances. So maybe you don't
Yes.
expect to be invited, but it just makes you feel badly, right? It makes
Yes.
you feel lonely, like, well, I'm not doing that. Like, maybe
Right.
not even that you thought you should be invited, but that, like, there's this whole other world going on out there. But I think to your point, it's social media, and you have to keep
Yes.
reminding yourself it's social media.
Yes, exactly. People's lives look so good online. And
Right.
the reality is, all of us are doing many, many boring, mundane things all the time, in addition to how glamorous our lives look online.
Exactly.
Don't you think at this age of all three of us, we would know that?
I don't, I don't think it ever
Don't you
goes
mean like, I
away.
mean, I feel like at our age, we would know like who
You
is our
think,
close
right?
friends and
Well,
who, yeah.
I believe that you never get out of junior high school.
I think it's
So
true
It
I
on
gets
think
some
worse.
level.
I think you are always stuck in that same emotional place,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
try to sort of tell that to my now kind of young adult children too. I mean,
Yes.
you're going to still have those feelings, and you can't wipe them away totally. You just can't because it's part of
No,
kind
and
of
you
being on this
shouldn't.
planet.
I mean, they're
Yeah.
useful feelings. There's a lot of information in there. So if you can accept your feelings and then start to kind of work through them, thinking about, well, all the different parts, right? So what does this really mean? That wasn't my event. I understand why I wasn't invited, but I feel sad when I see it. Well, maybe you do need to do something about your loneliness, to start to plan some events yourself, or you can let a friend know that the next time everybody's going skating or whatever it is, you'd love to come along long. Again, if you'll forgive all these examples from my own life, I had a group of friends that traveled together. And one time I mentioned to one of them, oh, that looks so fun. I would love to go if you guys ever want someone extra. They invited me, and I still travel with this group of
Yeah,
friends.
that's nice.
Wow.
It's
Yeah.
back to making yourself
Yeah.
vulnerable. You have to be willing. I mean, at the same time, you have to be willing to hear, oh gosh, no, we were all roommates in college, but we could do another trip or we could do something
Yeah, but
else.
no, yeah.
I think also, the other thing, I mean, the FOMO, I think is a big issue, and I do think
Yes.
it carries us through life. But,
Yes.
at a certain point, you were talking about, the stages of life and your children, if you have children, for
Yeah.
example,
Yeah.
they grow up. And the happiest thing you could possibly want is that they do have fulfilling lives and they have friends and if it's siblings, they have relationships together.
Yes.
And guess what? You're not a part of that.
Right.
And I honestly, I mean, it's just a quick anecdote, but when my daughter was in high school, I was the Disneyland mom. I took all three of my kids and all of
Yes.
their friends all over the years. I took them to Disneyland because I kind of loved it. And so one day my daughter said to me, I think she was probably a senior in high school at this point, and she said, so and so and I really want to go to Disneyland on this day off. And I said, great, I can do that. I'm not doing anything that day. And there was silence. And it was like, no, mom, we're driving there. And I can't tell you how bad it made me feel, how happy I was, of course, living, the outside. But no, seriously, it was a really hard thing. But it's a microcosm of the fact that it points out a certain thing we have to make an adjustment to. Our lives are now different.
Yeah.
That's
They're
right.
not,
It's
they're
one of
not,
those changes.
it's one of
That's
those
right.
big changes that says, it blares to us, we better find our own things. We
That's right.
better find our own people, our own things. And
Yes.
that continues to happen in life.
Yeah, but
It
it's
does.
not like you get a warning about it, right? So
Yeah.
you're like, you're working to, take care of your kids, build your family, whatever. They're leaving at some point, mostly to go to college. That you will be an empty nester, but nobody like prepares you for like what that feels like and the change that can have not only on you but your relationship if you have a significant other. Like that the dynamics. I mean, it's like really major stuff that starts to happen. I think trying to find something that works for you and that gets you excited and interested in it. It's like it's work. You got to like figure it out.
So are you saying that I have to be okay when the four of my kids get together and
Yeah.
their spouses when I'm not invited? I have to be okay with that?
I think it's
Yeah.
yours.
Unfortunately,
I know. I know. I'm
I,
always like,
so hard. I
I know exactly
know.
what you mean, but I actually think it's a great thing. Sarah, do you find, I mean, we're all talking about this here, but you see many people and, you see people in intimate settings.
Yes.
Um, do you find that this issue of feeling invisible or lonely or left out is thematic in the clients that you see, particularly those
Yes.
I would say who are over the age of 40 or 50 or
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, I honestly, again, I do see it in everybody of every age, but this is a vulnerable time for people. This is a hard time because I mean, it's like as all of you are talking about having grown kids who are out of the house. If you had kids, if you didn't have kids, suddenly you're seeing people with all of these generations that are, people's kids are getting married and having children of their own. You can feel really alone in the world seeing that continue on. People, I hate to say this, but people lose partners. It's painful. It is really important to try and build strong connections with your friends or create new friends, build community, because you never know what's going to happen. You can have everybody's happy, healthy, and great, but your kids pick up and move to a different country. So yes, you do need to be able to start to build relationships. And to Susan's point, it doesn't matter what we know intellectually. We know intellectually our kids are going to grow up and out if we have kids. We know intellectually that our partner can predecease us. You know it, but it is not until you're in it that you really have to grapple with what it means to
Yeah.
you and how much space emotionally and psychologically these relationships were filling for you. So you do have to you have to practice a lot of self-compassion. You have to be kind to yourself and good to yourself, but yes, you also have to pull yourself up and get out there and have those awkward, embarrassing moments where you meet people for coffee that you don't know very well, or, try and deepen a relationship that's been skimming along the surface a
What
little bit.
about feeling lonely in a good marriage? Okay,
Yes.
even in what one defines as a good marriage. I mean, are
Yeah.
people feeling lonely? And I'm not speaking for myself. I just want to know in general. A
Not
friend is
not
asking.
you
A friend is
asking
asking.
for a friend. Yes, you can. It can happen that you just get into the habit of sort of being in orbit around each other, but not really engaging with each other. So if you notice you're really feeling lonely, I mean, there's sort of two departments of this. There's noticing you're feeling lonely and you didn't used to, in which case there's a connection that's probably needing some rebuilding or some work to strengthen it up. In which in which case I tend to recommend doing a project together or learning something together, certainly going out on dates together, which we can forget to do when we've been married for 30 plus years or however long it is. Then there's the other kind where once all the noise has stopped, people aren't working, kids are gone, people start to realize, like, oh, I've never turned to my partner for this kind of connection. I've never asked this of my partner. And then you have to set about the hard work of finding out if you can build that connection really for the first time with someone that you've been with for a long time. That can be challenging. Obviously, I'm going to say you can do couples therapy, but you really don't have to. Again, you can do some of these techniques, where you deliberately set out time to try and learn something together, work on something together, make dates. If you can't bring yourselves to do that, then you definitely should explore couples therapy, of course, is my bias.
It's interesting. We were talking to a friend after golf, and we were, talking that we were going to have this conversation about loneliness. And I thought it was so interesting because the first thing she said is, she goes, I love being by myself. I love being alone, which is, there's so many different nuances to all this, right? Because having your own time is different, right? Than
Yes,
than
yes,
feeling alone, right?
yes, exactly. You can.
Ask that question, right? Like, what's the
What's the difference between being alone and feeling lonely?
yeah,
Oh, they're so different. So you can be in isolation without feeling lonely, and that capacity to be by yourself without feeling lonely. Again, I'm going to keep saying the same things, but
yeah,
it has to do with the strength of your existing connections because you internalize those relationships. So one thing I hear people say a lot when they're in a good marriage or a good partnership is they kind of love when their partner goes out of town for a few days because they have all of that experience of being connected and loved, but they also get to sleep
right.
whenever they want to
That's
sleep. Or
interesting. Yeah,
yeah,
Used to
it's
love that.
nice.
yeah,
Yeah, it's a good feeling. Um, the exact opposite of that is where you feel lonely in the company of another person. That comes from that lack of connection, that lack of a sense of feeling seen, heard, known, loved. You want to feel accepted in your relationship for who and how you are, and you will feel good. If you're not feeling that in the company of someone, you really want to look at the nature of that relationship. Why do I feel lonely when I'm with so and so, whoever it is?
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the things in sort of researching some of this is I was sort of shocked, but I could read the statistics. But there's all this bad physical things that happen as a result of being lonely, which I was shocked. Heart disease,
Yeah.
dementia,
Yeah.
a lot of different things. So, I mean, maybe I don't know how well versed you are on that, but I was just so shocked to hear that. Is it like why? Like
Being a
how?
nutritionist, I do see that on a daily basis.
I
People's
bet
health
you.
goes down when they're not
Yes.
connected and they're alone, lonely, and they're not feeling like just really taken care of and
Yes.
nourished.
Mm,
I think that's exactly right. And I think that that starts really from the beginning. You may have heard of the concept of failure to thrive in infants or
mm,
children. I
Mm-hmm.
think you can see that in people straight through the life cycle. It's that feeling of, I mean, I love that, Listen, that feeling of not being nourished, or that really matters. Nourishment comes in many forms. So yes, from wonderful, healthy food, but from relationships. I think when people don't have to begin with, a sort of solid foundation, a really good start from their family of origin. A lot of that loneliness gets, it's like a little seed that's in there from the beginning. And if they
Yeah.
are left alone,
mm,
As a
unfortunately,
kid, as a child, like
yeah,
a lot of
yeah,
times.
yeah,
yeah.
I think
Way
so.
back.
Mhm. So you
Or
have to work
people,
on that trauma of that and just really, that's a thing you work on yourself, right?
when you want to
That emotional
notice it,
connection.
Yeah, because I think it can block forming the kinds of relationships that can give you what you need. So, of course, again, my bias is always, oh, everybody should be in therapy. But truly, truly, what I say all the time is it doesn't matter where you work on this. So you can work on it in
Yes.
your yoga class. You can work on it with a priest, a rabbi, a minister, a Buddhist monk. You can work on it with a coach. You can work on it with your nutritionist. But the key is just start to understand where your thoughts or feelings are blocking you from making connections so that you don't feel that you have to be alone or that circumstances are forcing you to be alone. I mean, I think we do see in people in rural communities, it's a risk because there's literally no one around, but you'd be amazed how many people are isolated in huge cities
Oh yeah,
because they
no, I
don't.
think yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't surprise actually doesn't surprise me at all.
That's a beautiful comment, though. It's really about, really just solidifying your own self and loving who you are, right? And
Yes,
then if you
yes.
love who you are and you're confident, you're building the confidence, you might reach out, and I might reach out to Phyllis
Feel
and
better.
ask her.
Feel better.
I'm
That's
busy. I'm busy. I'm too busy.
Very
No,
busy
stop.
already.
It's been
You
too
know
long.
what? I guess the sake of time, because we're kind of getting to the end,
yeah.
I wonder maybe if you could give us a few tips on, things that people can do to try to combat this because it's real. And I think people feel sometimes they're the only ones feeling it.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
think it's important to say, we're here to tell you,
We
you're
all,
not.
we all
And that
probably feel it.
we're all feeling it at different times. But like, what are a couple things that we can do to change that?
Well, here's one that, again, may sound a little corny, but it works in both directions. It will make you feel less lonely and it can help someone else feel lonely. If you want to bake something for someone and drop it off at their house,
Perfect.
you know,
So
All
I
right,
know
I'm
Phyllis
waiting for
would.
the next suggestion. Go ahead.
Okay, next suggestion. No,
No,
no
I'm kidding.
bacon. You really can invite people, like I said at the beginning, even if you're
Right.
not an inviter. You can notice if you are in a group setting, any kind of community setting, if someone is seated by herself or himself, you can chit chat with them a little bit, just chit
Mhm.
chat. Honestly, one thing that I have always been amazed by is if you're checking out at the supermarket and you chat with the checker and they're nice and you're having a nice time, you feel good when you
Yeah,
walk away from that encounter,
so
Absolutely.
you
true.
know?
So true.
And
I want to go back to that checker the next time.
yeah, for sure. But if they're silent or you're silent or
You're
worse, if you see someone like snap at someone, it can ruin your day, their day. If you do see someone who's having a bad moment, you can say something light. You can ask if they want help or need help. I think a lot of times if you can leave someone feeling better when you walk away from them, that's just a really good feeling, and that can happen literally on a hiking trail. If someone drops their water bottle and you pick it up and hand it to them, that's a moment of connection. You don't have to stay and talk to them. I don't want to set anybody up to have a stalker or anything like that, but you can just really just relate or connect with them. If you can smile at somebody as you're walking down the street. I know it sounds cheesy, but one study that they did was they found that when people are depressed, they will walk, with their faces will look sad and downcast. And wherever they go, we mirror each other. People aren't always
Yeah.
aware that they do that. So when you
Wow.
walk into a room and you're sad, if you look up, people around you will look sad to you. So
Oh, wow.
depressed people will report that they think there are depressed people everywhere. And people who are feeling pretty good don't tend to think that everyone around them is
Yeah.
depressed. And it
Right. Wow.
is because facial expressions mirror each other. So you'd be shocked how often just smiling at someone as you walk by or saying hello really does make a difference for people. I think.
or,
That's a
or,
beautiful.
or pay someone a compliment like
Right.
Yes.
that
Yeah.
happened to me like one day on the street. Somebody's like, wow, that is a fantastic outfit. It like made
Yes.
my day. I didn't
It
know who this
really
person was,
does. It doesn't.
so
Yeah.
so upbeat, right?
That's it. So I
Yeah,
know it can sound very like Pollyanna, but it really, I mean, think you felt so good
so
that that
good.
person stopped long enough just to say incredible and then kept going.
Exactly.
So I think that's a great point you're making, that these dozens of daily interactions during a day
Yeah,
can make you at the end of the day feel one way or another
yeah,
if they've been
Yes.
negative, they've been positive. So I
Yes.
think that's a really
And it goes
good
both
point.
ways, right?
Yes.
Because
You
like
feel better.
if you make the other person feel good, you
Right.
get like a response back, and like it
Yes.
gives you maybe that a little bit warm feeling too, and also gives you maybe more strength to have those conversations or
That's
invite
right.
somebody
Yeah,
for
people don't seem so
coffee.
scary. I'll say one more thing, which is that you know how when people drive, they get so mad if someone cuts them off or slams on the brakes or whatever. I always want to remind people that that is whatever you think just happened is a story you're telling yourself. So as long as you're going to tell yourself stories, you might as well tell yourself a positive story. And I mean that about everything, about any interaction. If someone
Yeah.
gets in the elevator and lets the door shut in your face, why not assume that they are racing to get to that appointment, or maybe they have to go to the bathroom, or maybe, or maybe they just didn't even, they were so involved, they didn't even see you. But you don't have to tell yourself that they let the elevator door shut in your face because they didn't like you, or because
Yeah.
or because
Right.
you're a jerk, or because
Don't
you
assume the
know.
Right.
worst.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Maybe
So
having
be
a really bad day.
Right. Right.
exactly. Be careful of the stories you tell yourself. It's maybe the last
I
thing.
moved to New York when I was younger and I didn't know a soul, not a single soul. And I felt so lonely and alone there. And I remember walking up and down the street and someone said that to me, smile. Well, we didn't have phones at that time, so that was a good thing too, but
Yes.
smile and say hello. And it did. It really
Yeah,
did make for feeling not so lonely and
that's
alone.
right.
I felt
That's
like
right.
all these people I didn't know were my
Yeah.
friends.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and I never want someone to tell you to smile. You're allowed to be in whatever mood you're in. But when someone does smile at you and say hello, as you're saying, it makes such a big difference. So, keep that in mind. This tiny encounter could really change the course of someone else's day.
Sarah, one of the things I've heard also is, besides this, which is great because I think it goes both ways, is, maybe doing something to help others. And
Yeah.
I don't know if that it could be volunteering or helping
Yes.
a friend, something like that. Maybe
Yes.
another good way to sort of break that cycle is that something that,
That is 100% correct. And you don't have to push past your own comfort zone. I don't want people to feel resentful because that undoes all the good of doing the good work. But really, anything you could do it will make you feel better. That um, I want to say hardwired. That's not really a thing, but there are parts of the brain that light up when you do good, as opposed to doing well. That you want to do good for people. It does feel good to do good. If you have a friend who needs a ride somewhere and you don't mind driving her, or again, like if someone's sick and you just want to send them some soup, you don't even have to leave your home these days. You can just order something for someone online. I mean, any little thing you can do that helps someone, but definitely a lot of people in need will not ask for help. So it can be useful to ask about something specific. Can I do this for you? Even will help them say, no, but you could do that, as opposed to let me know if I can help. People tend not to let you know when you phrase
right,
it that
right.
way.
Have you ever heard of when you get up in the morning to say good morning to five people in your text
Yeah,
good
I
morning? Have you
love
ever heard
that.
that?
Oh,
No,
that's
it's a
good.
good idea. It is a really lovely idea. It just putting it out there.
Right.
It is a great idea. I think that's a good one. Oops, everybody froze on my
My
phone.
friend
There.
Sam was calling. Comes
Okay.
all the time, that friend spam. That's one of my great connections. Yeah, 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 yeah.
See, you've done such a good job of firming up those connections that they're
Yeah,
there.
exactly. Exactly. That it calls all the time. Anyway, this was amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you. I
Thank
feel
you so
like so
much.
inspired and
Thank you.
Yeah, it really was
gotta
great.
call a friend. Like
Well,
I think
thank you
that's
for
We're gonna
having me.
text
I
them. We're gonna
really
call them.
enjoyed it.
well, that's a whole other conversation about texting versus
Yeah, that's
talking,
true.
but maybe that's a
Well, part
conversation
two.
for part two.
Well,
Yeah.
Part two.
I would
Exactly.
be honored to come back anytime you want me. So
Okay.
you just
All
let me
right.
know.
Okay.
We would love that. Thank you.
Thank you.
This is
Thank
great.
God
Take
you.
bless
care.
you.
Bye bye.
Bye.
Everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye.